What's going on, everybody? I'm Johnny Brook. Welcome back to another Crafted Workshop video. And in this week's video, I've got a guest, my friend Ashley Harwood. How you doing, Ashley?
I'm good, thanks, Johnny.
Yeah, thanks for coming by the shop. I had never used traditional turning tools, which is something Ashley's very good at. So figured she could show me the ropes, and we turned this really awesome bowl, and I learned a whole lot. So I guess let's go ahead and get started with the video. Before actually getting to turning, we first needed to get this new slow speed grinder set up so that we could sharpen my new turning tools, which are a set that Ashley recommends and also sells on her website along with a bunch of other turning accessories. And Ashley prefers to sharpen her tools with CBN wheels, so we first needed to get one of those installed on the grinder. After getting the CBN wheel installed, we could get a platform set up, which helps to support the turning tools as they're being sharpened. And Ashley sharpens her bowl gouges with what's called a 40-40 grind, which means that there's a 40-degree bevel on the nose and wings of the gouge, with the wings swept back at a 40-degree angle. And here's a graphic that hopefully better explains that. So to make sharpening the turning tools at this specific angle a little bit easier, we set the platform to a 40-degree angle using this angle gauge. And finally, we marked off where we would start and stop the sweep of the tool as it moves across the grinder platform, which just provided a visual guide, so we ended up with a consistent grind across the entire nose of the tool.
Okay, now that's good to go.
This is literally the first time I've ever held a traditional turning tool. So this is very new to me.
It's gonna change your world.
So with the grinder all set up, we could go ahead and sharpen the two bowl gouges. And I apologize for the terrible camera angle here, but it's really tough to get a good angle with two people standing at the grinder.
We're gonna start in line with that tape, and we're just gonna rock it slightly above, slightly below, kind of hovering around that tape right there.
Okay.
So watch me, and then I'll help you do that.
So after Ashley sharpened one of the gouges, I could give sharpening a shot myself, and I was definitely surprised with how quick the whole process was. Honestly, sharpening was one of the biggest reasons I had avoided using traditional tools up until this point, and it was honestly a lot easier than I expected.
Done.
Wow, all right, cool. So with my tools nice and sharp, we could move on to some actual turning. And Ashley brought this beautiful piece of cherry for us to turn, and the first step was to get it mounted on the lathe.
The important thing that I was looking at is so that that crack doesn't come all the way up to the rim, because that could give us problems. Now that one might. We'll just see how this goes.
All right. So we first mounted the blank between centers using the drive center in the headstock and the live center in the tailstock.
Good. That's good. Yeah.
All right. And this is not the most secure mounting method, but we were really only starting with it this way to allow us to create a mortise for mounting the blank on a chuck. And before doing any of that though, we needed to flatten the face of the bowl blank, and I got a chance to finally try using a traditional turning tool, a bowl gouge, for the first time ever.
See how easy that is?
Oh yeah. So once that was done, we could work on cutting the mortise, which required a different tool orientation. And one thing I started to figure out here was that turning with traditional tools has a lot more to do with body position and tool orientation than using carbide tools. And this is something that'll definitely require some more practice for me to really get the hang of. Also, I really don't feel like I have the knowledge on these techniques to really teach you guys the ins and outs here. But Ashley did an outstanding Wood Whisperer Guild course on the basics of bowl turning if you're interested in learning more, and I'll link to that in the video description if you want to check that out. Anyway, to cut the negative angle on the inside of the mortise, which matches up with the dovetail-shaped jaws on the chuck, we switched over to the Boudin, which is another type of turning tool. And this tool has an angle ground on the end, which makes really quick work of cutting that angle. Not light. With that, the mortise was done, so we could flip the blank around and get it mounted onto the chuck.
So I like to find the back end of it, back it out about an inch, and then tap it.
Okay.
And just, be ready for it. You don't want that thing to hit the ground.
Yep.
It happens every time.
Like that?
Yeah, yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's it.
First, I needed to remove the drive center, of course, launching it onto the floor, and then we could get the chuck installed. And Ashley uses these Vicmark chucks, which she also sells, and they are super high quality. And your chuck is really one of the biggest factors in keeping your turning safe, as you really want the chuck to have a pretty solid hold on your work. God, that's so much more true than it usually is when I Anyway, before turning the outside of the bowl, we went ahead and removed some of the bark from the blank, since it has the tendency to fly off of the lathe while you're turning. I'm in it, and I'm holding a ping pong ball, right?
Yep. Exactly, look at that!
Like I watched the video! Once that was done, we could start turning the outside of the bowl, and this was yet another tool position. And as you can see, Ashley uses a push cut, and that's also the method she teaches, and this was very new to me coming from carbide tools. And the thing that really stood out immediately about this technique was the speed at which I could remove material. We were removing probably close to ½ inch per pass here, which is something I have never been able to do with carbide tools.
Nice!
It's crazy. It removes such a monstrous amount of material too. Jeez. Alright.
Okay.
So after getting the sides of the bowl roughed out, we could face off the bottom of the bowl and start working on the curved outside of the bowl. And we started by knocking off the corner, once again removing a monstrous amount of material. There we go. Good Lord, that was a lot of wood. And before starting to shape the actual curve, we removed the tailstock to give us more room to move the tool around. And another thing you'll notice here is how long the tools Ashley uses are. And this is to provide more leverage when making your cuts. It's a lot easier to do this kind of work with longer tools, as removing this much material requires some force.
Man, that was like aggressive. It was beating me.
With the tailstock removed, we could start refining the outside shape of the bowl, and this was where things got really fun to me. I started to get a little bit more comfortable with the tools, and you can see just how effortlessly the tool moves through this piece of wood and the ridiculous amount of shavings that are flying off of the bowl. We also went ahead and cut the tenon on the bottom of the bowl so that we could flip the bowl around and mount it to the chuck. So after cutting the tenon and before flipping the bowl around, Ashley wanted to get one more clean pass across the entire side of the bowl. And by making a cut in one pass, we would end up with a nearly perfect surface finish right off of the tool. Before making this final pass, we also sharpened the gouge so that it would cut as clean as possible, and then we made the final cut.
Nice job!
And as you can see, after that cut, we ended up with an incredible surface finish, even on the ingrain sections of this blank. So with that, we could flip the bowl around and get it mounted on the chuck, making sure it was nicely balanced and had good contact with the chuck jaws. The next step was getting the face cleaned up and then removing the bulk of the material from the inside of the bowl. And we did this in stages, as the more material you remove from the center of the bowl, the weaker the sides of the bowl get. And we started by removing a few inches of material, getting the wall thickness down closer to the final size. I also got some slow-mo shots here, and man, slow-mo turning is just so satisfying. Next, we went ahead and worked on the rim of the bowl, since there was still plenty of material supporting the sides at this point. Ashley uses a negative rake scraper to clean up the rim, and it left an incredibly smooth finish on the rim. We went for a nice subtle rounded rim, and I really liked the final look. We also noticed some pretty big cracks showing up as we hollowed out the bowl, so we went ahead and ran some CA glue into the cracks to help stabilize them.
Cool.
And I might have gone a little bit overboard with the CA glue, so we needed to use the negative rake scraper again to remove the excess from the outside of the bowl before moving on. Still hella smooth. A little overboard with the CA glue there. Next, it was really just more of the same, removing more material and continuing to refine the wall thickness as we got deeper and deeper into the bowl. While I'm working on the inside of the bowl, let's take a second to talk about the sponsor of this week's video, Powermatic, the gold standard. So as you might have noticed, this is my first project on my new Powermatic 3520C lathe, and it has been an absolute pleasure to use so far. The 3520C is insanely powerful, rock solid, weighing in at over 700 pounds, and has some really cool features, one of which is a magnetic control box, which allows you to move it around to be more convenient depending on your turning position. To learn more about the 3520C and the rest of my Powermatic tools, check out the links in the video description below, and thanks to Powermatic for sponsoring this week's video and supporting what I do. So after getting the bowl mostly hollowed out, we could switch over to the aptly named bottom bowl gouge. So as the name suggests, the bottom bowl gouge is designed to clean up the bottom of bowls and is also beefy enough so that it can work with the extreme overhang that is required when turning the bottom of bowls. And this gouge allows you to really smooth the transition from the inside walls of the bowl to the bottom, which is something I've personally always struggled with. I usually end up just sanding the inside of my bowls to death, but this tool really negates the need for that. So with that, the inside of the bowl was done, so all that was left to do was shape the foot. To do this, Ashley used another technique I've never tried, a Jamb Chuck. So a Jamb Chuck is basically just a piece of wood that's turned to have an extremely tight fit inside the rim of the bowl. And this allows you to work on the foot of the bowl without damaging the finished rim of the bowl. And one of the nice things about a Jamb Chuck is that it's free if it's made out of scraps, and it can be custom fit to each bowl you make. And Ashley really took her time sneaking up on the fit here, and we ended up with an incredibly secure hold. So before cutting in the foot, we made one final pass on the outside of the bowl to even up the outside of the tenon with the sides of the bowl, and also to cut the curve on the outside of the foot. And I really love this little curve detail. I really think it gives the bowl a very elegant feel.
Told you we'd do it.
Finally, we hollowed out the inside of the foot and cleaned it up with the bowl gouge, and the bowl was pretty much done.
Nice.
So the thumb and fingers here.
Okay.
You're gonna go straight in, about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the bowl.
Okay. So to get the bowl off of the Jamb Chuck, we used a parting tool to create a small groove in the Jamb Chuck right by the rim of the bowl, and this groove allowed us to pry the bowl free.
Yeah.
There you go.
And as you can hopefully see, there's a small sliver of the Jamb Chuck left between the square and the rim of the bowl, so the rim of the finished bowl isn't getting damaged at all. And with that, I could pull off the bowl and admire our work.
Glad I held on to that. Hell yeah! All right, man.
Nice job.
All right, guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. I know I learned a ton during this project. Thank you so much, Ashley, for coming by. It was a lot of fun.
Anytime, John.
Yeah. In case you're not already aware, Ashley has a pretty new YouTube channel, putting out really awesome videos, so definitely go subscribe to her. If you guys have never tried turning, you really should. It's super, super fun, and traditional tools have definitely opened up a whole new world of turning potential. So
Send those ribbons flying.
yes, it was super fun. As you can see, we're covered in shaving. So thanks for watching, everybody, and until next time, happy building.
Thanks, guys.